Hi, my name's Keith Cooper of Northlight Images, and in this video I'm going to have a look at topics related to prints. Print sizes, print viewing distances, print resolutions, image resolutions, how you're processing, general rules of thumb for choosing what you can get away with in printing, and more to the point, why just simply following the numbers doesn't always give you the best results, and there may be better ways which can be quite surprising in that you can end up getting good sized prints from actually quite low resolution images. It's all about relative contrast and things like that. But anyway, let's start about what resolution is needed for printing size and distance. There's an old sort of trope that goes around that says, oh yes, you should print at 300 dpi, or of course that's wrong, because it should be ppi, pixels per inch. Now, if you're not sure of the difference between pixels per inch, ppi and dpi, I've put some links to some articles and things that go through this and show about how different types of resolution are suitable for different printers. I put some links in this rather than reiterate all that here. Don't really need to go through all the details of it. Suffice to say, there are no magic numbers for print resolution, but 300 is as good as anything, a reasonable starting point. But where does that 300 come from? Does it have any sort of basis in how we see things? Well, I've got a table here. This is actually from an article I first published back in 2005 looking at prints. Now, I'll come back to some changes in software and how the content of images changes this, but the details then were effectively the same. Now, this is a table of data, and it came from a specialist list that I was following at the time, and it gives you approximate visual resolution. In other words, how sharp can we see? Now, I need glasses for medium distances, longer distance I don't need glasses, close up I need 2 pairs of glasses or really strong magnifying glass. So these are optimal. Now, you can challenge these numbers. There are different derivations of them and different ones, but they show a general trend in that if you are viewing a print from 6 inches away, and I'm going to use inches here for my friends in the US, since I still think in feet and inches. 6 inches away, well, for me, the resolution required doesn't really matter, because at 6 inches I can't see clearly without strong glasses. That's why I don't use a phone very often, because there's just no detail on it. It's why I've got a separate monitor for looking at the output of my camera while I'm recording this, and various other things. Make allowances for your eyesight, but do remember other people have worse, better eyesight, different eyesight. So at 6 inches viewing distance, we have an effective resolution, and this is in good light, so real resolutions of people may be lower, of over 1,000 pixels per inch. This is why, if you're going to be printing small prints at 6x4s, 7x5s, sort of stuff that people hold at reasonable distances like this, that old thing about 300 ppi, no. Send as much real detail to the printer driver as you've got. Now, I've done testing on this. I've done experiments looking at it. So I say that backed by actual testing, not just some theoretical basis. But as I say, have a look at the notes that I put in for this. There's an awful lot of stuff I've done about optimal resolutions, or resolutions that work. So yes, if you're viewing something at 6 inches, and me with strong glasses on, you need quite high resolution. This is why I was at a show once and I produced some largish prints, not as big as these, but as fair sized prints. And a company was using some of them to show some of their papers. And somebody walked up to one of these printers, shoved the nose right into it and just dismissed it and said, "This is over sharpened," in that suitably pompous way that people do when they're making a pronouncement. And Now, this was the third day of the show, and my patience with people, I'm not necessarily always great in people-facing roles, but my patience was wearing thin, and somebody else quickly heard this, stepped in, and moved me aside to talk to the person. But yeah, they were not, the prints were not made for viewing at this distance. They're big prints. Now, I'll come back to viewing distances and some other stuff in a moment, but if we look at the table of data that we've got here, we can see, and these are based on sort of visual perception models, we can see that by the time we get to a viewing distance of 24 inches, so a couple of feet, the resolution that people's eyesight is capable of seeing is fractionally below 300 pixels per inch. So for big prints, if nobody's going to view them from closer than a couple of feet, and so you're going to view them closer than that distance, you don't need to go to better than 300. 300's fine. In fact, the example I've got here, and this is from an exhibition I had in 2005, we've got some prints here on the staircase. Some of these prints here. Now, people going up the stairs were going to be stopping and looking at them. People were going to be looking at these prints from a foot or two away. So therefore, I had to print these at quite high resolution. So these ones were actually printed at about 400, I think. I'd upscaled them. But I've got some stuff I'll come back to about upscaling, rescaling, all the stuff about the image editing part. And one of the key things I want to sort of try and get across here is that you don't just slavishly follow the numbers. You need to think about the images, what the content of the image is, how you want it to be viewed. But as I'll come back to that. So we've got some images here. The ones on the stairs here needed to be printed at high resolution because people are going to be quite close to them. In fact, if they step back too far away from them, they'd fall off the staircase. So we didn't really want that. Now, the images here in this part of the exhibition, we've got similar frame size. And, they're quite big prints. So those I've produced, I think, around about 300, because I assumed that it depended on the actual image and how much I was going to sharpen it. But those are printed at 360 perhaps. I don't recall the exact printer I printed this on. Which one? I think it was an Epson 9600. So it would have been at 360 those would have been printed. Yeah, fair enough. But the important one are these two pictures over the other side of the balcony. Now, it's about 10, 12 feet at least to where those pictures are. So I knew from where they were going to be that nobody was going to be standing closer than perhaps 10 feet away from them. And if I look at 10 feet on here, on the viewing distance, 10 feet, that's 120 inches. I see that I only need a resolution, according to this, of 57 pixels per inch. What this means is that if you are producing big pictures and nobody's going to stand close to them, you can get away with tremendously low resolutions. Now, of course, they won't look great if somebody walks up to them to a foot or two away, but it's worth remembering. And it's been well known for years because the resolution you get on billboards and hoardings and things like that, the resolutions are very low because people don't see them from very close up. They're meant to be viewed perhaps by a car going past from a bus or walking down at some distance away, so the resolution is lower. What it means in terms of megapixels needed for a picture is that once you get over, and I'm going to say 15 to 20 megapixels, you can produce most images at any size you like. Now, to produce them at enough detail that they can be viewed from a foot or two away as well, you're perhaps going to need 25, 30 more megapixels. I've used 50 megapixels for about the last nearly 10 years. And that means that I can effectively print at any size. Even you can look at a lot of detail close up. But I still have to pay attention to image content, to sharpening, and all those other little bits and pieces. If I use something like, and this is Fuji GFX 100, this is 100 megapixels. At 100 megapixels, I can produce large prints with phenomenally fine detail. So I can produce largish prints that you can look at quite close up as well. Now, the perspective and everything changes when you start look at huge prints from close up like that. So it changes a lot of other things as well. And prints, when they're designed to be viewed further away, our perception of depth inside the print, as it were, changes as well. There's a whole lot of things. As I say, don't go just by the numbers. You need to understand the complexities of our visual system. Well, you don't need to, it is very complex, but you need to have a few ideas of how things change, how we perceive detail. So if a shot, if it's a small print, big print, different distances, the amount of content, of clutter you can get away with in the picture varies. For small images, they need to be relatively simple. Whereas further away, you can introduce more fine detail and it doesn't get in the way. We perceive images at different distances, different scales. We perceive them quite differently. So at this exhibition, it worked very well. In fact, several of the pictures, at least one picture I can see in this, I still have that picture on the wall here above this printer. And that still works as a great picture. Now, if I look at that very close, I can start to see where the limitations of that being taken with, it was only taken with 11 megapixels. I could see the limitations there. But I don't look at it close. I'm sitting away from here about 5 feet away from it. It looks great. Depends on where you want to put your pictures and how they look. Anyway, coming back to these actual images, how much work do you need to do to an image to print it large, print it small? Well, obviously, if you've got the detail out of the camera, it helps. Certainly images out of a camera like this, you could print away. If you're printing 8x10s, they are naturally such high resolution. You wouldn't send necessarily all that resolution to the printer. I would still send, as I say, as much real resolution as I've got, over 300. For some prints, I would resample them. I would use that. Now, I've got lots of stuff about resampling, and this is an area where software has improved massively over the last few years. Things like Gigapixel AI, Sharpen AI, and there will be various other ones coming up. And, this software is changing quite rapidly at the moment. So whatever you've got, 2 or 3 years' time, think whether it's still relevant or whether there's a better approach. Now, I've done some articles about taking low resolution images and some videos as well that actually look at this in detail. I'll try and put lots of links in the notes to this that go back to articles. Now, I say go back to articles, not necessarily videos, because some of these predate me making videos. I only started making the videos in 2020, whereas I've actually been writing articles and stuff for over 20 years. So some articles, they are still as valid today as was when I wrote them 15 years ago. Very little has changed. The other nice bit about actual written articles is I can go in the article and I can add an update note to it or something like that, and I can put links to stuff. But that's just part of the problem of videos versus written articles. Anyway, we've got these pictures. What about the image itself? I mentioned enlarging, processing, various ways you can do it, Gigapixel AI, various stuff. It is about, when we look at an image, it is not necessarily actual contrast we see and actual sharpness. We have a perception of sharpness. Now that varies, and this is one of the reasons why I'm not terribly bothered about taking landscape pictures where and using focus stacking or tilt something to get everything in focus, because I don't necessarily want a whole landscape in focus. Now, some people will go, I want everything sharp. Well, that's great. That's a choice, a compositional choice that you make on it. But I quite like the idea of understanding where the sharp bits are in the image, where the soft bits are. For people who say you can just sharpen anyway, there's a something like Lightroom where there's a sharpen for print button effectively, that you can just do that. To me, that misses the whole key point of sharpening large prints, and that is that I decide which bits I want sharp. Now, for some things, like an image like this picture at the back here, picture of a print of the yard, one of my architectural photos, I want stuff sharp. But for other images, there may be one element in the picture that I want that absolutely sharp, and I want it perhaps to stand out as a bit sharper. Now, I don't do portrait work or anything like that, but certainly how you decide on the relative sharpness of people's features, backgrounds, things like that, has a big difference on how pictures are perceived. It's very different from aspects of my architectural work. But landscape, I might decide there are some elements I want sharp and some I don't. For the sharpen everything approach, the click to sharpen approach, I just say, what about the sky? There are some elements of pictures which, right from the raw processing onwards, need absolutely no sharpening at all. Now, why would I sharpen clouds and the sky? Unless there's a plane or something in the sky that I want to show up, you don't often need sharpening of skies. Sharpening enhances noise and other imperfections. If you leave it soft, great. You can then use masking. But then that's one of the reasons I use Photoshop for big prints like this. It gives me that control of where the sharpness is, where the softness is. Now, it's all about taste, and your personal tastes in sharpness, how you like an image looking, may vary. I've seen people said that their images have been critiqued for not being sharp all over. Well, it depends what the picture was. Sometimes it doesn't matter. It's up to you to decide what matters to you, and don't just go, the rules say I have to do sharpening here on this. Well, maybe it doesn't make a better picture. That's one of those things you have to decide. And this comes back to the size as well. So as I said, there is no magic number for this, but keep your resolution up above 300. I would say ideally keep it up above, say, 350, 400. If you've got real resolution images, use that. Pay a lot of attention to sharpening, because that's about how people perceive your images. And you can completely change how an image looks to somebody just by changing which bits are sharp, which bits are not so sharp. I'm not saying soft, out of focus. I'm just saying that sharpness doesn't need to be uniform across a picture. It's up to what you decide with it. Now, if you add that to the basic rules of sort of how much resolution do I need, you will find that you're printing much more based on the picture and what you want people to see in the picture. So it's about the perceptions of the picture. Nobody looks, well, some technical judges might for whatever reason, but nobody looks at your pictures and go, wow, that's an absolutely stunning shot of such and such. This background here, oh, that's a bit too soft. That's a sort of, in a way, it's the technical at that point doesn't matter, because people who actually look at your big prints, or even moderately sized prints, people who look at them, they don't care about stuff like that. They just care, is it a great print? Now, things like this, paying attention to the details of knowing where it's going to be viewed, knowing the lighting. In dimmer lighting, our vision is not so sharp, for example, but knowing stuff like that all helps give you an edge. But don't fall into the trap of thinking there are absolute rules of I have to print at such and such. Oh, this camera I've got here is not enough megapixels to print at such and such a size. They are general guidelines, no more. There is no more to it than that. It's about producing great pictures and great prints of those pictures. And like many, I find that when something is as a print, it is much more a real picture than just viewing on screen. Now, if you're preparing stuff on screen or projection, it's different. There are some other general considerations there. So projection, for example, the resolution is the resolution of your projector. The further away the projector, the bigger the image. Because of the limited resolution, people may need to stand further away from. It's a very different area. This is talking about print. But the key really is actually understanding your image and how you want it seen. Remember, when people look at a picture, their attention is drawn to the sharp bits. If it's uniformly sharp, their attention is drawn, well, who knows? Use little things like that. Same way as you might, for example, with a picture, rather than correcting, for lens corrections, rather than correcting 100% vignetting, you might leave a little bit of vignetting on a lens, on an image, because the slight darkening of the corners just draws you in. Overdo it and it becomes a bit of a gimmick. Underdo it and it doesn't constrain the viewer's view. Which is what you want to do. The difference I've found in looking at exhibitions between pictures that people think are nice and people think are great pictures, the great pictures are the ones that people, as they're walking around, they just stop and look at. Now, I did this, it's great if you ever have an exhibition. Stand around the exhibition, don't wear the I am the photographer badge, just stand around as if you're visiting it. And watch how people look at your pictures. It's really interesting to see it. I saw people here just leaning on the balcony, just staring at this for 5 minutes. Absolutely superb, because I spent a lot longer than 5 minutes just sitting on the beach where I took that photograph, looking at it. But there's the key to it. Take care about the numbers. Use them to give you some direction, but don't live by them. Anyway, I hope that was some interest. If you've got any questions, please do ask. It's people's questions that often give me ideas for videos like this. I hope that's of some help. But I said, please do have a look at the notes where I put links to articles, things that go into all of this stuff in much more detail. Probably too much detail for some people, but that's the benefit of the written articles. So thanks for watching and bye.